So you can actually, once you leave here, once you've had enough of the difficulty going through these, you can actually go through them. And as I told you yesterday, you can contact me if you have any questions, and I will respond as best as I possibly can.
I do have most of this on a video too.
Okay.
So if they need it, I can throw it up on like a YouTube type thing.
And Classic Rob says that he has this posted on video. And he's going to post it on private YouTube. And he and I will be sharing the royalties off of that. Yeah, I'll look for that first royalty check to come in. All right, let's go on and take a look a little bit farther. This is still on the solicitation of bankruptcy auctions. There are, and some of this is going to get redundant. So we're going to probably go through a good many of these slides fairly quickly. When you want to find information on attorneys, now I showed you on Pacer that it's all there, but let's say that you don't have specific contact information for attorneys. Every state that I have ever looked on has a state bar association website. Georgia's happens to be www.gabar.org. You can go there, you can do a search, you can get names, you can get addresses, you can get email addresses from the State Bar Association website. Or unless they removed them, last time I looked, you can get them. You can get affiliations, you can find out who that attorney's affiliated with, you can find out their educational status, what school they went to. You can actually see if they've ever had any bar sanctions. So, kind of a pretty good source for additional information. Another source would be findlaw.com. You can do lawyer searches there, or you can do them on Martindale Hubbard, which has a lawyer locator. And FindLaw and Martindale, and I'm not sure that the Bar Association's website has them, but I know some of them have them, will actually categorize those attorneys. If you're looking for bankruptcy attorneys, you can search bankruptcy attorneys, and they'll come up. All right, secured creditors. If you're soliciting secured creditors, Pacer, once again, FDIC.gov, and the American Bankers Association. We talked a little bit about FDIC.gov yesterday, and I'm still going to hold off going into that website until I see if it's in this afternoon's class. And since I know the instructor this afternoon, I'm going to see if we can make sure that it shows up in this afternoon's class on how to search FDIC. All right, solicitation of bankruptcy auction from the debtor. Let's say that you know the debtor's name, and that's how I actually showed you to look one up. You can search it by name. And like I said, these are fairly redundant. Counsel for debtors. The association, the ABI World, their fees are $95 a year. With a membership, you can post-sale the asset. Southeastern Bankruptcy Law Institute, they're based out of Atlanta. They have a conference every March, probably about this same time in Atlanta. That's the one that we occasionally attend and exhibit at. Solicitation of bankruptcy auctions with the politics. We'll talk about the local civic organizations, being Rotary, Kiwanis, Civic Clubs, Fraternal Group, and your church. My church is one of the biggest social organizations that I'm involved in. Take advantage of those relationships and leverage them to do business. And this is a little disclaimer I added after that one instance of getting dinged for putting a name in there that says the information contained in the following slides pertain to an actual bankruptcy auction. All information is a matter of public record, and as such, discussion of this case does not in any way constitute an ethical violation. So, all right. We're going to go in, and these are some of those documents that I showed you. We're going to move through and look at the components of these documents. The trustee's application for order, the employment of the auctioneer is involved. The trustee's application for order approving employment of the auctioneer. The verified statement of proposed professional pursuant to Rule 2014. That's the affidavit of disinterestedness. The motion of trustees for authority to sell real property at public auction, the order approving employment of the auctioneer, the order authorizing the sale of certain real properties at public auction, the trustee's statement of properties sold. Remember your auction summary reports? That's your auction summary report. That's the reason it's important to know how to do those. Application for compensation for auctioneer and order allowing compensation of auctioneer. I was telling someone at the break, one of my favorite things about the trustee that I work for now is he allows me to deduct my fees and commissions. And he does that by stating it in the order up front. A lot of trustees, you will have to submit an application to be employed. It came up, I was asked if we have our own escrow account. Yes, we have our own escrow account, so we're holding the money ourselves. It's not being held in the trustee's escrow account. Because in Georgia, we believe in the golden rule. Anybody know what the golden rule is? Absolutely. Now, that doesn't necessarily always apply in a federal court, but it's a pretty good way to get started. So, we're able to deduct our fees. I would say 99% of the bankruptcy trustees are not going to allow you to deduct their fees. They're going to make you pay them 100% of the proceeds, and then they're going to file an application for compensation for auctioneer. The judge is going to sign an order after a 21-day waiting period and potentially a hearing where he goes over your fee application, make sure you're not getting paid too much, and then when he decides to write you the check, he's going to write you that check. And I have one trustee that was on that list that I scrolled by earlier from Georgia that I refused to work for. I have done 2 bankruptcy auctions for him. One of them was selling a $500 million piece of real estate that he decided he was going to take 6 months to pay me. I did not particularly want to wait 6 months on my commission, so I'd just rather not work for him anymore. He was also a very difficult trustee to work for. You know, you've got your money laid out there. If I've got significant funds invested in advertising, I don't want to have to wait all that time to get paid. I'd rather work for people that are going to pay me faster. Trustees, all right, let's look at them individually. Trustee's application for order approving employment of the auctioneer is prepared and filed by counsel for the trustee. The terms and conditions of employment or compensation are spelled out, and you attach a contract and/or estimate of expenses, including advertising, labor, utilities, etc. Anything that you think you're going to spend, go ahead and spell it out up front. This is an actual copy of it. I realize that it's very hard to see, but that's some of the other copies that we looked at. Can you see them better? Can you see it better on your personal computers? Okay. It was signed by the trustee in this particular case. And it spells out everything. It talks about the facts showing the employment of the auctioneer, why it's necessary, the entity to be employed, and the reasons for selection. My qualifications are down there. The professional services to be rendered, see 2A above, the eligibility of entity to be employed, the proposed arrangement for employment and expenses, and it was in here that it's spelled out how it's going to be paid, and I actually had blacked it out of that one with it. Going to be further disseminated. All right, the verified statement proposed professional pursuant to Rule 2014. There's too many P's in that sentence for me to get it out. It's also known as the affidavit of disinterest. It's a basic form. It says the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's prepared and filed by the counsel of the trustee, and it should be notarized. Although in all cases, it's not necessarily going to be notarized. That's where you're saying that you've got no affiliation with anyone listed on the creditor matrix. Now, what is an affiliation? You know, if you have an account with Nations Bank and the debtor owes Nations Bank money, is that a conflict of interest? And what Harry said was no, but if you have stock in Nations Bank, it could be. I actually would not disclose that I had, because I don't think, unless you were a board member of Nations Bank and the hope held that much stock, that your little stock interest would have a whole lot, which that would be something really to ultimately ask the trustee. You know, ask him those little questions, you're building credibility, that he knows that you're trying to do things right. This is a copy of it. This is very similar to the one that I read earlier, just in a little bit different format. And this is one that was actually notarized, the ones that you saw earlier. That trustee doesn't require me to have them notarized. And my signature is a little, obviously took a little longer to sign this one. This was a case from '04. This is the case I was telling you about, that the gentleman defrauded a pile of elderly people and then ultimately committed suicide. We basically sold the entire town of Union Point, Georgia. He owned the majority of the commercial district, and I believe we did 4 or 5 auctions. The first 2 auctions were liquidations of FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, out of his businesses that occupied most of those buildings. And then there were 3 subsequent real estate auctions after that. There was the auction of most of the commercial properties. There was the auction of his home, which is the one that this one is particularly on, and then later on we sold the farm. So it's still there. I mean, it's just, I mean, it really almost completely brought down an entire town. Union Point, Union Point's a very small town. There's not a whole lot there. This man's family owned the bank for many years. It's a very affluent family, and he basically got into the short loan business. He owned a series of finance companies. He levied that and ended up doing some insurance sales, but he was basically selling high interest return investments to individuals. He was guaranteeing them 18–20% return on their money, and it was a complete Ponzi scheme. He was taking my money, paying it to Harry on his investment, taking Ruthie's money, paying it to me. It was working as it was a complete pyramid scheme, is all that it was. And like all good pyramid schemes, when they fall very hard. There was a lot of people that made a lot of money over the years, and then there was some people that lost literally everything that they had. There were people that, when there was a mill in this town, it was an old textile mill. The mill shut down. Mr. Stewart bought the mill. He bought the mill with the intentions of reopening the mill, but he convinced all the employees that lost their job to invest their money with him, their retirement accounts. I mean, it was seriously as bad as it possibly could have been. I mean, there were people that every dime that they could work their entire life for, that was money they had made in this mill. When the mill shut down, they moved those retirement accounts to Stewart Finance and lost all that money. Motion of trustee for authority to sell real property at auction is prepared by the council for trustee. Details the list of properties to be sold and the reason for the auction. There it is. The order approving the employment of the auctioneer is prepared by the council for the trustee and attached to the application for the judge's signature. Remember I said that earlier? That if you looked at it when it was filed, you would have seen this blank document that would have been attached at the end. The judge signs it. This is what the judge signed. Here I say it must be signed by the judge prior to commencement of any work. If you do any work prior to that, it's strictly at your own risk. And there it was. Order authorizing the sale of certain real properties at public auction. This is an additional order. It's prepared by the council for the trustee. It's attached to the motion of sale. Must be signed by the judge. Legal authority to conduct the auction, refer to and attach the sales contract. And what I will actually do a lot of times, and this was a very contentious case. There was a lot of people saying, by what authority are you doing this? So when we got these orders authorizing the sale of Greene County real estate, we would literally post them in the windows of the business. This is by what authority I'm doing this. Slow down a little bit and tell you a little more story on this one also. Capitalize on the notoriety of the auction, of the bankruptcy auction that you're doing. I mean, we actually were featured on several major news shows, newspaper articles, a lot of different things because of the notoriety of this auction. I don't make it a standard practice in my bankruptcy auction advertising to disclose the name and the case number of the debtor, but I will in certain instances. When I do the Congrows and when I do legendary performance cars, I will state why we're doing this. I mean, I'll put, you know, the bankruptcy of legendary performance cars because people tie that back to this criminal, this set of criminals that defrauded all those people, and it's going to bring extra attention to the auction. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. I do have some trustees that demand it's done on every one of them. So I'm just kind of giving me the leeway to do what I want to do. Trustee statement of property sold. This is what comes out at the end. It's the final advertising schedule, the copy of the mail out, the copies of newspapers and periodical advertisement, the vendor invoices, the labor sheets including names, days work, rates, video, audio reporting. And every one of you is probably doing every one of these things already, but once again, this is your auction summary report, simply submitted to the trustee. Reporting functions include settlement sheets or closing statements, send the gross proceeds to the trustee. And I talked about gross versus net. In this particular one, I did have to send the gross proceeds, but this was for a different trustee. Trustee statement of property sold. Closing statement. Certificate of service, where it was noticed out. Application for compensation for the auctioneer, state your commission, your expenses, your advertising, and your labor and miscellaneous. The compensation hearing, all creditors are noticed. And I say here, be prepared. If you have to go to a hearing, this is where your commission is subject to being attacked. Now, once again, I have never had my commission rate reduced in the bankruptcy court. Has anyone that does bankruptcies ever had their commission reduced in the bankruptcy court? That's a little bit unusual because normally there'll be somebody in this class that says, yes, I have. You know,
I have a question on that slide that says the trustees settle on a property sold. We're doing personal property auctions that are not bankruptcy. We come down to, you know, everything's lotted, it's capital, video, whatever, as I understand. Property being sold is basically cash in, cash out.
Right.
Not an individual accounting of each individual item there provided to the court. Everyone's didn't want to see that. Just want to see how many money you take what's going on, because there was questions raised from the party that went bankrupt. Hey, but I went bankrupt on, what did the auction? What there? So I just wonder the mechanics of this, how you do this differently from what we're normally used to.
all right, you asked a single question that's got a lot of different prongs to it. And your initial question, or your initial statement was that even though you lot and catalog everything individually, when you do a recap, you will tend to show just the gross or net proceeds as a lump sum instead of individual pricing.
Is that the way the bankruptcy is done? Because
It's subject to how the trustee wants it. Generally, I'm going to submit it to them on an item-by-item basis. I mean, I'm going to submit that full accounting to them. In fact, I have never had one tell me that asked for a full accounting to attach to it, that they only wanted the gross numbers. They always want the other. Now, something else that you said that was interesting that I picked up on, and I want to make this point pretty plainly, is that the debtor stated that none of the assets that he filed, excuse me, some of the assets that he filed bankruptcy on weren't sold at that time, which
Weren't in the sale.
weren't in the sale.
See, the door was locked.
Okay.
Trees were put on. It's a case I'm pretty familiar, it was a coin store.
Right.
And there was a chain put on the door. And a lot of family members, a lot of people showed up at the sale because there was arguments.
They claimed personal ownership of
Well,
things.
the auctioneer, let's just say this, who handled that sale, his license was eventually removed based on fraud and auto problems. When the
Okay.
sale went down, those items were not there and available. A substantial amount of those items were down. So when they complained to bankruptcy court, they said, you're right, stop when you file and lock was put on the door. And we have since as a firm locally stayed away from that business because the good old boy lockout, how it's done and what's going on now. Two of those auctioneers are no longer in business. So I'm interested to look at it.
Once again, that's kind of a multi-pronged thing, but let me really tell you what the gist of it is. When a person files bankruptcy, every asset that they own in the name that they file bankruptcy in becomes a asset of that case. That's the reason that when this trustee that I work for finds fraudulently conveyed assets, he's able to reach out, take them away from the people that gave them, that they were transferred into by court action, and bring them back, even though they weren't listed in there. In bankruptcy, the trustee actually replaces the individual. If Mark Manley was to file a personal bankruptcy, the day that I file a bankruptcy and a trustee is appointed, Mark Manley owns nothing. The trustee has complete ownership. He assumes every role and every right that I have. Now, as far as, I've had a whole lot of those kind of same issues. Debtors claiming that there's items there that aren't there. I try to make all my initial inspections with the trustee, with a camera in hand, taking pictures, so that you can do these kind of things. I want to remind y'all once again that there's good people that file bankruptcy and there's bad people that file bankruptcy, and I tend to work with a lot of the worst ones. And so all these kind of claims are going to get made all the time. And you really just have to have that thick skin again and say, you know what, it wasn't there. We're not going to worry about that.
That's why we videotape every sale.
Videotape everything, because right now, and we could war story this bankruptcy class all day long. There was a lady filed bankruptcy. She had inherited several hundred acres of land. She mortgaged the land, bought an extremely nice 3,500 square foot home with the money, mortgaged the house, filled it full of assets, drove new Mercedes all the time, retired school teacher, and never made a single payment on any of these assets. She filed as a Chapter 12 because she owned this farm and had a farming interest. She rented, co-shared farming with the sharecrop is what I'm trying to say. She sharecropped with the farmer, so she had this farming interest. She drug this bankruptcy out about 7 years. We ended up, didn't get to sell the farm because it actually was located next to a plantation, and the plantation owner offered more for the land than we ever thought it would bring. So we didn't make the commission after we did a whole lot of due diligence on it. But that was another one of those things, then that's fine, I'm looking down the road. Ended up getting to sell her house. Had to have court action to even be able to show the house, had to have court action to remove her from the house. We didn't end up physically having to remove her. She ended up getting money back at the end of the case, even though it went on for 7 years, and she has now, I was told last week, filed a grievance in the bankruptcy court. So that's the kind of stuff that you're going to encounter. And in that particular case, she kept threatening us with lawsuits the entire time. The lawyer kept telling me, he said, Mark, don't worry about it. She doesn't have a case, she doesn't have a case. Well, we all know you can sue anybody for anything. And even if she doesn't have a case, I got to defend it. So that's the kind of issues that you run across. Document everything that you do in bankruptcy. I mean, I got a camera that stays with me all the time. Thank goodness for, phones now that have really high megapixel cameras on them, because if you don't have your big camera with you, start snapping pictures with your phone. Do everything you can. Just like this guy that didn't disclose all these guns, I guarantee you, when we go back to that hunting lodge, those guns will not be in that gun safe. But guess what? I got a picture. We can ask where those guns are. But you know what's going to happen then? They're not my guns. I mean, that's the standard issue that you go through. I can pull this guy's bankruptcy schedules up right now. He claims every stick of furniture in his house is owned by his wife. Now, guys, all of us that are married, our wives will probably claim that every stick of furniture in our house is owned by them. And they probably bought a good bit of it, but we helped in some shape, form, or fashion. I love reading bankruptcy schedules because you can read anybody's bankruptcy schedules, and they typically are going to put that their clothes are worth $150. How many clothes can you buy for $150? Those are the kind of things that you encounter. Let's go on through a little bit, because I really want to talk about some of this expert witness stuff. This was the settlement. This was actually a list of all the buyers, showing the purchase prices, contract price, the order allowing compensation to the auctioneer. Well, Judge Laney signed off on it saying, hey, Raul can get paid. Bankruptcy auction advertising. I'm kind of specific in the way I do that. How many people do absolute auctions? How many people only do absolute auctions? I like that. Amanda says they only do absolute auctions. I like that. Well, let me tell you what. If you do bankruptcy auctions, they're as good as absolute auctions. When you do bankruptcy auctions, always, always, always put in your header bankruptcy auction. And I add some other terms in there. Selling by order of the United States Bankruptcy Court. What does that tell you? It's got to be sold. It's going to be sold. Now, I suppose that could be a little bit misleading, because most of the sales are subject to court approval, because you'll actually do very few absolute auctions in the bankruptcy court. There are some, I'm not going to tell you they don't happen, but very, very, very seldom are they absolute auctions. Even this 430 acres of farmland that we're going to have coming up that's free and clear. Technically, that's not an absolute auction, but we know it's going to sell because there's no certain number that we have to get to. But the court still has to sign off on it. The trustee's info. A lot of times the trustee wants a little bit of glory, so I'll add his name to it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I have trustees that say, absolutely, don't put my name in there. I don't want anybody contacting me about anything to do with this auction. The debtor's name. I talked about that. In some cases, it can be beneficial. Case number. Notice the creditors. Remember me saying, mail your creditor matrix. It's right there. It's on the website. It's a great source of future business. Plus, it's a great way to let people that are involved in that case know that justice is coming in some shape, form, or fashion. Sheila.
Just have a question on the name, and I know you guys talked about case numbers and so forth. You don't necessarily have to have that in there.
Right.
Is that in like your state? Like we do a lot of estate work, like I said yesterday, and our
And it could be. I mean, that's one of those kind of
I'm
things.
just wondering if that is like a, you know.
If it is, it's gonna be one of the regional, rules that may apply. There are, and I can't remember exactly what the term of it is, but there's actually a book that's published by each region that has the regional rules, and that would be something to ask the bankruptcy trustees that you work for. They may absolutely say, yeah, put the debtor's name and case number in every piece of advertising that you do. Here's an example. This was the guy's personal home that we sold. An absolutely beautiful house.